When you upgrade or add hardware that improves combustion efficiency, the factory tune is no longer ideal. You're going to change the best mean timing, in other words, the amount of ignition timing advance needed to deliver your peak combustion pressures at critical crank angle. You're going to change the required injector pulse width to deliver even a 14.7 to 1 air-fuel ratio to keep it stock. You may also need to change compensation tables, warm-up schedule like the choke and whatnot. So tuning is like the last step. Now the factory ECU will work with you up to a point. And that point's not very impressive. It's like 10-15% gains. Remember the long-term fuel trims from the scan tool section? So the computer has programmed barriers where it won't go beyond those parameters and trying to help out with your modifications. So tuning can range from do nothing, let the ECU do it, up to complete standalone, ECU. It will improve performance and fuel economy when you get everything right. At the bottom, easiest, just plug and play, are these chip tuners. They plug into the OBD2 port. There's nothing you can do. There's no tuning on your part. They have built-in algorithms where they monitor the CAN bus, look for little holes that they are programmed to say, we can do better than this. And the pitch is they deliver better fuel economy and performance. I did an online search and I found a couple that had pretty good reviews. So we'll touch on that later. Moving up from there, we have what I'm going to call influencers. And the electronic enhancer section, we looked at like the map adjust and the IXRs and those little performance modules. They actually can work sometimes when done right. So we'll cover that. There's a product called the Unichip that I've used in the past where you cut an injector wire, and then the Unichip has two wires. One goes to the ECU side, one goes to the injector side. Cut the coil wire, two wires from Unichip, one goes to the ECU, one goes to the ignition coil, and then the software for the Unichip has XY tables. And you just go in there and you're changing what the factory is doing. So you're not starting from scratch. If your tables are all zeros, you're just input equals output, with the factory still controlling things as is. If, for example, on the ignition table you have a 2, that doesn't mean you have 2 degrees total timing. That means that the Unichip is modifying what the factory is doing by 2 degrees. Then we have OBD2 tuners. HP Tuner, Diablo, Honda. There's a couple of them. And what they'll do is they'll allow you to go in and overwrite the factory tables. Then at the, bottom of the list or top of the list, depending on how you want to look at it, would be your standalones. This would be like a Motec or a Mega Squirt. You will replace part or all of the factory ECU functionality. So we have a big challenge. Now, starting at the bottom, tuning isn't too bad. I mean, you can get 40% gains without going wild and crazy if you got the hardware to justify it. But when you want to start getting into the really, really good gains, now you're going to have some kind of tunability and skill sets. So many times guys will go out, buy HP Tuner, buy the license for their VIN, set the laptop on the passenger seat, go driving and tuning and just not knowing what they're doing, not knowing what the targets are, not even knowing how to tell if they achieved them. And of course, drivability issues pop up, the performance goes down, the fuel economy goes down, they start setting trouble codes. Tuning at the deep level, it's got a learning curve. Fortunately, there's a plethora of resources out there. For one, we have DIY Auto Tune. They're the #1 seller of the Mega Squirt products. They are also the go-to guys for the Innovate Motorsports widebands. They're down in Georgia, and they're putting together kind of like a book online for free. As of this filming, they were getting close to half done. So there's a lot of the chapters they haven't gotten to yet. But if you just follow this URL here, that'll take you to that online tuner's guide. In addition to that, there's books. Now, over the years, I've acquired a few and could recommend them. How to Tune and Modify Engine Management Systems by Jeff Hartman. We have Maximum Boost by Corky Bell. Performance Fuel Injection Systems by Matt Kramer and Jerry Hoffman. Building and Tuning High Performance Electronic Fuel Injection by Ben Strader. Just a sampling, folks. There's a lot of other books out there. In addition to books and like DIY Auto Tunes Tuning Guide, there's YouTube videos. There's guys out there that do this for a living every single day. And to earn a couple of extra shekels, they'll post videos on YouTube for the ad money. So it is a learning curve, but fortunately, there's a lot of resources that will help to get you there. Now, for the tuning, you can have some tools, right? You can do the butt dyno thing, seat of the pants. I think that feels better. Not very accurate, not very reliable, not at all recommended. First and foremost, you're going to want a notebook. You've got to take notes. You have to know where you were before and reference it when you're where you are now and what got you there. And believe me, after just a couple of days of tuning, you're going to just be so grateful for those notes. If you're working on an older, carbureted type vehicle, a timing light. That way you can record where you're at. You change it by 2 degrees. Because of the timing light, you're not just tuning by ear. And then with your notes, what did that do? 96 and newer, OBD2 scan tool. If you have an OBD1 that you're tuning, you might be able to get like a GM had their scan tool, Chrysler had their DRB2, Ford, Toyota, but some kind of scan tool where you can take advantage of the information the factory ECU is just dying to tell you. A wideband oxygen sensor, especially tuning the fuel, it's not everything you need to know, but at least it's a good guideline. I recommend Innovate Motorsports, even though there's AEM and other competitors, because of the type of support Innovate offers. 5-gas analyzer is like the cat's meow as far as gathering information, because those gases can tell you so much. Just go and look at the emissions section to learn some of the valuable information a 5-gas can teach you. And then data logging. If you're going to go with HP Tuner or a Motec, Megasquirt, they have data logging functionality built into their software. If you're doing it outside of those parameters, Innovate Motorsports is giving away for free their LogWorks software, it's data logging software, and their only requirement is you got to use one of their O2s, wideband O2s. That's pretty fair and reasonable. And then the actual tuners, the chip tuners. Some years ago, some buddies of mine, they played around with a product called Volo. Now, we're going back 12, 14 years ago, and it would wire in to the back side of your J1962 OBD2 connector. And out of about a half a dozen guys that tried it, not one reported positive results. But let's fast forward a decade or more, and there's quite a few on the market now that they're making some pretty good claims. So I'm only mentioning it. I've not tried it. I don't know anybody who has. I'm giving the benefit of the doubt. Then we move up and we got the Unichip, where you can just alter the factory signals. You move up from there and you got HP Tuner, Diablo, Data, where you can overwrite the factory tables. And then the Mac Daddy is the standalone ECU. And the perfect environment to be tuning is on a chassis dyno, which very few of us are going to have access to. Just mentioning it. To better understand what our goals are, let's go back in our Wayback Machine to 1970, where the vehicles had this old-fashioned distributor and a carburetor. If we can understand how the mechanics of those mechanical devices function, it'll help us to better understand what our goals are tuning electronically. Ignition timing was controlled by a distributor, and you had your base timing. How do you change that? Loosen a bolt, crank the distributor, crank the bolt back down. Then you have what are called mechanical advance mechanisms that would typically be like weights and then springs. The springs pull the weights to the center. And as the engine speed gets higher and higher, RPM, the centrifugal forces act against those weights, pulling against the springs and advance timing. Now, they're adjustable in a couple of different ways. First of all, how far can that total advance go? Well, there's little slots. Those weights kind of shift in slots. And if you want less total advance, you can weld them closed. If you want more total advance, you can take a rat tail file and open them up. Next, when do they start to kick in? At what RPM does the advance start to kick in, and at what RPM is it fully advanced? Well, if you put lighter weight springs in there, the weights carry more authority and you start getting everything happening sooner. Heavier weights will do the same thing. If you put heavier springs in there, then it takes a higher RPM before everything's fully engaged. You have a vacuum advance. Now, as the RPMs increase, you need more and more timing advance because everything's happening faster in relation to crank angle degrees. And so you need things to initiate sooner to get the punchline CCAP pressures. When you have idle conditions, the molecules are just spaced so far apart that flame propagation is extremely slow. Therefore, light throttle, you want more timing advance because it's going to take longer to combust that charge and give us that peak CCA pressure. As you open the throttle, now you've got more molecules that are spaced closer together and flame propagation rate increases, requiring less ignition timing advance. As you open the throttle, you have a vacuum advance mechanism. It has a diaphragm connected to your vacuum and then a spring. The spring's trying to pull no advance and the vacuum is trying to pull full advance. So at idle, the vacuum wins. You get full advance. As you open the throttle and the vacuum starts dropping, load is increasing, the spring starts winning and you get less and less advance. Now, popular applications, you can get adjustable vacuum advance canisters. That will allow you to adjust what the range is, what's full advance. Also, at what vacuum levels by changing the springs out. If you have a stock mild cam, you're probably idling at 18 inches of vacuum. If you have somewhat of a performance cam, you might be idling at 12 inches of vacuum. And so that spring on the vacuum advance, you would swap that out to get everything happening when you need to.